Africa has many wonderfully diverse freshwater ecosystems. From the cool rivers of the Fynbos to the warm subtropical wetlands of the northeastern parts of our country. From the crystal clear springs of the Groot Mariku to the diverse rivers of the Waterberg. Fresh water is the lifeblood of our country. Its availability determines the well-being of South Africans. Any shortages or decline in quality of water undermine our capacity for economic development. The biodiversity of our rivers, wetlands and estuaries is under threat in South Africa. We continue to see the gradual decline of these freshwater ecosystems. And whilst there's consensus that we need to conserve these ecosystems as best we can, the critical question is how many of these ecosystems and which ones do we need to conserve in a near natural state so that we can promote social and economic development whilst still conserving these freshwater environments for future generations. The National Freshwater Ecosystem Priority Areas project has answered this question. The multi-partner team started off by selecting criteria for identifying freshwater priority areas. From here, data was collected from various sectors of South Africa, where during a series of workshops, some 150 stakeholders offered inputs to the map products that were produced.
When we talk about partnerships, freshwater ecosystems is the one example that you cannot be able to effectively achieve freshwater conservation if you don't actually work in partnerships. For various reasons that the different role players that are involved, the decision makers in government, the environmental agencies that are concerned about the freshwater ecosystems, all different sectors have got different mandates. So there's no single entity that is responsible for making the decisions around water.
Some of the success factors in tackling a big, ambitious project like this has been the collaborative spirit of the freshwater scientific community in South Africa. We've had freshwater ecologists from around the country who've spent days in workshops, poring over maps, contributing their data, their expertise. Often we find that the freshwater ecologists who've tramped around rivers in a certain region of the country for decades and have an enormous wealth of knowledge in their minds. And what we've managed to do through NPEPA is to capture some of that and to make sure that that collective knowledge from around the country is consolidated.
SANBI has been collecting wetland data since the National Land Cover 2000, and each and every year it's been doing some further analysis and updating where data becomes available. So when we were taking on this project, we also had to do some updates on that wetland map. So the provincial expertise did submit some data sets that they had available, and this data was then added into the national map using the GIS software, and that task was undertaken by SANBI and CSIR.
The biggest amount of data that was fed into the National Freshwater Ecosystem Priority Area Program was the aquatic data gathered by myself. And they are specifically focused on the macroinvertebrates because they are very sensitive to certain chemical and habitat changes. It was quite a challenge to say, how do we incorporate this into a bigger conservation plan? Because that's basically what NPEPA gives us. And the other information was also talks about fish that people have seen in the area, for example, the eels. I've personally seen an eel in the area, but I've never caught it. So strictly speaking, from a scientific point of view, we don't have eels. But from a word of mouth and myself seeing things and talking to farmers about it, those kinds of things we could contribute.
Once the data had been collected and processed, they found that South Africa's tributaries are in a better state than the main stem rivers and therefore offer excellent conservation opportunities. Some 57% of river ecosystems and 65% of wetland ecosystems are threatened. The team recommended that 22% of South Africa's river length be identified as freshwater ecosystem priority areas. They also found that South Africa has only 62 free-flowing rivers, which constitutes 4% of our river length.
Free-flowing rivers are rivers without dams, and they're a very rare feature on our landscape. Most of our rivers are dammed. We need to at least keep a few of these rivers as examples of free-flowing rivers.
This is important because dams seriously interfere with the ecological functioning of river and wetland ecosystems. They take water out of the rivers, obviously, and that reduces the amount of rivers that flows into estuaries and the sea. People often think that rivers flowing out to the sea is wasted, but in fact it's crucial for estuaries and for marine environments. Estuaries need fresh water, otherwise sandbars start to build up in the estuary and the estuary can backflood, which is obviously dangerous for people who live around the estuary. They also start to smell very bad if they don't have enough fresh water running into them. And nutrients in fresh water flow out to sea and help to sustain commercial and recreational fisheries.
The main product of this project has been to produce an atlas that contains maps illustrating where the freshwater ecosystem priority areas are in South Africa. With this atlas comes a DVD that contains data and a GIS viewer, as well as an implementation manual for these priority areas.
Maps are absolutely a central tool as far as encouraging or grabbing people's attention is concerned. So you can talk all you want about what should be done, but until you can actually say, especially explicitly, which areas exactly become part of this preferred area that you, configuration of protected or whatever category areas you've designated in those zones, you're actually not doing anything practical.
So South Africa's challenge is to bring in all the people supposed to implement, like what this project has done, bring all the implementers just from the start when we conceptualize in funding and also in doing research, and they make their contribution, and once we can be able to bring everybody together, I think we can improve on implementing.
The uptake of this project has been absolutely remarkable. The Department of Water Affairs is already using the product to assist in reserve determination and water classification exercises.
We also conduct reserve determinations for the ecological importance and sensitivity. So the ecological reserve that we do in pilot areas, for instance, we have conducted ecological reserves in the Western Cape for Olifantsdoring area. We are also conducting an ecological reserve for the whole of the Vaal system, the upper, lower and middle Vaal. In that particular water management area, we are already experiencing issues around illegal use of water as well as water quality. And this particular project is making a contribution in that regard to assist the department in decision making when it comes to the issuing of water use licenses in particular.
The Department of Environmental Affairs too are acutely aware of the benefits arising from using these maps.
The timing of this project is very opportune since we are in the process of the implementation of various pieces of legislation. I can think here of the listing of threatened ecosystems in terms of the Biodiversity Act, as well as the implementation of the National Protected Area Expansion Strategy, to which this project will contribute hugely.
But it's not just South African government departments that are benefiting from this work.
It's an area that the EWT has only got involved in probably about 2 to 3 years ago. We've slowly found our way into freshwater conservation, and one of the sort of focus areas for us has been the NPIPA project. That has helped us to really define priority areas. It's aided us in choosing this Croc-Marico catchment as one of the priority areas that we would like to focus our conservation efforts in.
I think one of the most positive things that has happened in the last 3-4 years is the FEPA process. We finally are developing proactive tools at a national level that will be part of national environmental affairs legislation, which will be extremely robust. Cape Nature is already using the maps, and we work closely with Working for Water in terms of prioritising their catchments for alien plant clearing, and obviously our input in our meetings with Working for Water is to say from a river conservation perspective or wetland conservation perspective, use the maps.
In the South African scenario, one cannot talk water without talking about the communities that depend on this water for their livelihoods. One such community earns their living on the banks of South Africa's last remaining free-flowing river in the northwestern regions of our country. The Groot Marico makes its way through the area, bringing life to an otherwise semi-arid region. Peter Mpefo, a Koffiekraal community representative, is the 4th generation that finds inspiration from this river.
I was born in Koffiekraal, and then my parents were born in Koffiekraal. My grandparents were born in Kofikral, and then the people in Kofikral, we have been attached to this river Madikwe for quite a long time. Everyone of my age, we used to swim on the river. We do some fishing. When we have a lot of heavy rains like this one, people in Kofikral, as we speak, they're eating fish. Water is always clean. Even on the side of the river, you see that we have, the different types of grasses. And also then we have tlhatla. And tlhatla is one of the grass that the Botswana people, they make carpets with it. And then it's still even growing today because the water is still clean, it's not contaminated. And we believe that if maybe the water will be contaminated, surely we don't have that kind of vegetation anymore.
This fear of contamination comes from recent mining applications to mine nickel in the area. For people like Peter, the contamination of this precious water source with its historical and cultural links would be unthinkable. In taking up the fight against mining in the area, they found an unlikely ally. While land claims have been the cause of much tension between farmers and the local communities, the passion for their river now sees them rallying for a common cause. Don van der Merwe, chairman of the Mariko Catchment Conservation Association, says that they intend establishing a biosphere reserve primarily focusing on the river and the catchment area. The National Freshwater Priority Areas project highlighted that the Upper Groot Mariko River in the Northwest Province was the only free-flowing river representative of the entire northwestern region of the country.
If you look at it just from a human perception sort of aspect, where else are you going to drink the water? Where else are you going to swim safely in the water? We owe it to ourselves to keep something intact that we can show our kids and their children what a river looks like, that you can actually drink the water straight out of it.
South Africa has an enormous wealth and diversity of freshwater ecosystems, and this is part of our natural heritage which we should look after and feel proud of. Healthy rivers and wetlands, for example, not only inspire our people and our nation and our visitors, but they also provide very valuable ecosystem service benefits that contribute to the long-term prosperity of our nation.